quotations of all time is that summarizing statement of the Apostle Paul at the conclusion of the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. He says, "Now abide these three things, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." Some years ago, Dr. Carl Menninger, a famous psychiatrist, observed, "Our shelves hold many books now in the place of faith and science and psychiatry and on the vicissitudes of men's efforts to love and be loved. But when it comes to hope, our shelves are bare." Well, that was then. This is now. But I'm afraid Dr. Menninger is right. Books, periodicals, a host of publications abound in material on the subject of faith and love. But when it comes to the subject of hope, there's only silence. Visit the Blue Hill Library. Peruse its encyclopedias and find references therein of faith and love, but rarely a reference to hope. If the truth were known, hope has never been thought of too kindly. The ancient Greeks thought of hope as an evil. Their philosophers and their writers viewed fate as unchangeable, and that being the case, hope was merely an illusion. The Skylists called hope the food of exiles. To Euripides, hope was humanity's curse. In Antigone, Socrates wrote, "We are of the tribe that asks questions, and we ask them to the bitter end, until no tiniest chance of hope remains to be strangled by our hands. We are the tribe that hates your filthy hope, your docile hope, hope, your harlot." And hope hasn't fared much better in the writings of more recent persons. In the 16th century, William Crowley penned, "Hope is fortune's cheating lottery, where for one prize 100 blanks there be. Hope of all its ills that men endure, the only cheap and universal cure. The captive's freedom and the sick man's health, the lover's victory and the beggar's wealth." In the 18th century, William Springston said, "Hope is a flatterer, the most upright of all parasites." And in the 19th century, Victor Hugo called hope a delusion. He said, "No hand can grasp a wave or a shadow." And more recently, the recent writer Thomas Drax has said, "Hope is but the fainting of the soul, another word for fear." But in the Bible, hope is championed, not as some empty dream or some pious expression or expectation, but as a confident patience which awaits the fulfillment of God's promises. Paul told the Romans, "Our salvation lies in hope." But in our moments of impatience, let's remember that hope always means waiting for something we haven't yet seen. So we must settle down and wait in patience. Patience, then, is the essential biblical root of all hope. It's more than mere optimism. Optimism is merely a starry-eyed dreaminess that usually finds itself quite some distance from reality. The optimist, like the pessimist, emphasizes the importance of the word "I." But hope is humble, it's modest, it's selfless, because hope is God-given and God-accomplished. Hope is always prefaced with the wisdom, "the Lord willing." Hope is unconcerned with the ambiguity of a past experience, because hope involves the process of patiently watching God at work. It's an adventure, a going forward in confident quest, empowered by the promises of God. Biblical hope never stands in isolation. When God encourages us to hope, He reminds us of other relevant factors. For instance, the record of His past performances, or the reliability of His word, or the power of His love, and the certainty of a great future. So that brings us to the subject at hand, the hope of Advent. Over the next 4 Sundays, we'll be lighting Advent candles. Hope, peace, love, joy. And then on Christmas Eve, we'll light the most important candle of all, the Christ candle. The candle from which all other candles rightfully acquire their radiance. And as these candles become brighter and brighter, so hope grows stronger and stronger. Because Advent is a season of hope. And here I might add, has there ever been a time more in need of hope than these times? Well, the answer is yes. It was 2,000 years ago. For centuries, people had been waiting for God to bear His hand to fulfill His promise of the coming of a Savior, His appointed one. And then it happened. And how incredibly inconsistent. An infant born, proclaimed as the challenge to the powerful and sprawling Roman Empire, a child pitted against Caesar. No one would have ever believed it, and yet what was its outcome? Caesar's legions are only history. Caesar's empire has long ago crumbled. His influence is all but forgotten. But the things which Christ both did and said have far exceeded their times and have extended in an unsurpassed way beyond the culture and the surroundings wherein these things were born. This then is the ground and foundation upon which hope is born. Every year as we enter the Advent season. How often have you suspicioned that love and goodwill will never be able to triumph over the hatred and the powers of evil that rage on in our world? It seems such a lopsided contest, particularly when evil appears to be the one who establishes the rules of the game. In such a setting, can we really find hope in the lovely but certainly outdated story of Christmas? Where do we begin? Well, we begin where its cast of characters began, right where they were. In the fields, at their work, along the road, caught up in the toils and troubles of their time. Is our world troubled? Sure it is. But so was theirs. In fact, sometimes I feel we become so sentimental about Christmas that we have no real appreciation of the treacherous and violent times into which Christ was born. It was a grim, it was a hopeless world. If the shepherds had read the day's headlines, they would have despaired, saying, "Look what the world has come to." But in hope, they peered into a humble manger in a dark night and declared, "Look what's come to the world." Can we echo that hope? How can we bring to the attention of our world a faith that endures? Let me suggest 2 ways. First, we can begin as God does, with little things. We saw that today. Little love can teach us great things. So also, when God would grow a tree, He starts with a seed. When he builds the universe, he uses atoms. When he saves the world, he calls for a baby. So don't think you have to change the world in one gigantic effort. That's probably why so little is being done, even to this day, in regard to reformation or evangelism. Because we have this mistaken idea that we have to do it in a big way or we don't do it at all. We've been duped by the super colossal mentality that bigger is better, or that only when it's considerable does it count. Now, certainly there have been mass efforts that have succeeded, but they've never done the magnificent accomplishments of what little things have done. Little things as they work toward a common outcome. I'm sorry Betsy Butler isn't with us today, but she's out west. But it's interesting, while she's been there, she's visited 2 sites that certainly show the power of small things. She's gone to the Carlsbad Caverns, whose mighty stalactites and stalagmites stand as a wonder of the endeavors of minute particles. Particles of calcium coming together to form magnificent pillars and exquisitely fashioned vaults and ceilings and magnificent formations of every sort. Go a little further southwest and you come to the Grand Canyon that Betsy's visited. It shows a relentless gnawing away of this earth, particle by particle, but it didn't happen overnight. And it wasn't the consequence of some mighty earth-moving equipment. It was the tireless work of a process barely visible to the human eye. In the same way, Jesus saw his kingdom, that it too would be realized. But he said the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed. It's the smallest of all seeds, but when it's grown, it's the grandest of shrubs, even like a tree, so much so that the birds of the air can come and there make nests in its branch. And so when you set out to do something, don't be disheartened or intimidated simply because your resources are limited or your efforts seem unequal to the task. No, just remember that God delights in doing wonderful things with less than perfect instruments. But we must not only do as God did, we must also begin with things as they are, with what lies at hand. It's important to dream, yes, and to aspire, but hope doesn't spring from mental ability. It's got to show itself in overt action. As we're told in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, sincerely do it with all your might. All great achievements have humble beginnings. If you wish to compose the Fifth Symphony, you've got to practice your scales. If you were to develop mass production of automobiles, you tinker with clocks and watches. And if you wish to formulate the theory of relativity, you commence with the memorization of the multiplication table and the periodic table of elements. And it's no different with those of us who would do God's work and follow his way and will. In Mark chapter 12, it's written of Jesus, the general public gladly heard him. Jesus always appealed to common people. undistinguished folks. But when they encounter Him and experience His love for them and His confidence in them, these undistinguished folks become distinguished. These ordinary people accomplish the extraordinary. Unimportant as we may seem, unequipped as we may be, impossible as the challenge appears, we can garner hope this and every Advent season as we ponder anew a manger, a feeding trough set in the heart of an ancient empire. And when we do so, we must remember, despise not the day of small things. In every Advent season, hope is reborn. A hope like the shining star that became the finger of God pointing to Bethlehem and to the future. It's the hope of Advent that though the outlook may appear to be dark, that only the darkness that we must fear is the darkness of doubt that blinds our way, or the darkness of sin that blots out the light of the world. In this season of the year, when the days are their shortest and the nights the darkest, we must remember that all darkness in the universe can not so much as put out one single light of a candle. John said of Jesus, in Him was life. Yes, and that life was the light of humankind. And that light goes on shining in the darkness, and the darkness will never be able to extinguish. So what if the headlines or the nightly news are gloomy? What if the forecast is grim? This and every Advent season re-echoes the message of hope first proclaimed to humble shepherds on the outskirts of Bethlehem, when they were told, "Behold, I bring you the most joyful news ever announced, and it's for everyone. Yes, the Savior, God's anointed one, has now been born." Someone once observed, life with Christ is an endless hope. Life without it is a hopeless end. Has Christ's light made its way to you? Into your heart, into your life, into your days, and yes, even into your nights? If they have, then you too have become a light unto the world. And as Alma concluded the children's part of the service today, I conclude also. Let your light shine so that the world may see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven.